Hello, and welcome to my TED Talk called The 4,000-Year History of Western Ethical Philosophy in 5 minutes. So, brace yourselves, this is going to be even more dumbed down than the Matrix sequels. Here we go. Ethics is the classification and judgment of human behavior. It's obviously very important in our lives. What is right and what is wrong? How should we write our laws? How should we act? That's all ethics. Now, let's start with the Bronze and Iron Age texts, from Code of Hammurabi to Homer's Iliad to, of course, the Torah. And here we see the first beginnings of universal dogmatic set of rules. By dogmatic, what I mean is, like, murder is bad is not up for debate, right? It's bad, that's a rule. In fact, in this history, we will see two different kinds of approaches to this. One is dogmatic, sets of rules, and the other one is algorithmic, like a formula to figure out which action is right and which is wrong. So a person from this era might have some idea around ethics, like humility is good because God says so. But someone has something to say about that, and his name is Socrates, and he flexes by asking people difficult questions to embarrass them. So he asks, is something really good because God says so? Or does God commend it because it's already inherently good? And he drops the mic, kind of with the exact same gesture you're seeing here, although here he is reaching out for the poison that will end his life. Anyway, his idea is that goodness is a separate concept from God, from human beings. It's its own thing. It doesn't come from religion. And Plato is Socrates' main student and biatch. And as a teacher's pet, he runs with this idea, and he has this, what we observe are shadows of an ideal truth kind of approach. So he says every good behavior is an imperfect copy of the ideal good, this thing that he calls the good. Aristotle follows him, uses the ethics as a word for the very first time, and he says, no, Plato. Goodness is not some vague idea of the good outside of everything else. It's tied to human beings. It's behaviors that if you were to act like this, it would flourish your life. So it's whatever flourishes human life is the right thing. This is going to be really important later. There are hedonists and stoics, of course. The hedonists are all about this algorithm, pretty simple. The right thing to do is whatever maximizes your pleasure. And here we see some lovely hedonists having a nice orgy together. And on the right side, we have the stoics, who are all about self-control and not letting emotions cloud their reason or judgment about what's the right thing to do. And we also see some stoics on the right with sticks up their butts. All right, let's jump to Jesus and Christianity. In my personal opinion, Jesus has given us the best formulation of the golden rule, which keeps popping up in different forms throughout history, but this is the version I like the most. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I think that's very clear and makes perfect sense. And of course, Christianity as a religion also provides a list of dogmatic good and bad things to do. Like there are sins, there are virtues well defined. Just like Islam, another major religion that also comes with a whole list of right or wrong things to do, these moral commandments. Now, in the 13th century, Thomas Aquinas comes up and he does this really interesting thing. He synthesizes the Bible with Aristotle. Remember how Aristotle tied ethics to humans? That's what he does too. Nature of humans, he says, is what determines what's right or wrong. So for example, murder is wrong because life is essential to humans. See, that's how he figures out what's right or wrong. Now we jump a bunch of centuries to Age of Enlightenment, and we're going to spend some time here. This is a busy period. And Hobbes, who is a little bit of a negative Nancy, says this Aristotle approach of tying it to humans doesn't make sense because the natural behavior, the state of nature of humans is not virtuous at all. Our natural behavior is to hurt and kill and take advantage of each other. We are disgusting, vile, putrid things. If we try to find ethics in here, we'll fail. In fact, the only way to figure out what's right to do is to imagine a purely logical, unemotional, almost inhuman person, and think what they would do to survive and prosper. Whatever they would do to survive is the right thing to do. And Locke is a very important figure to lay down the foundations of Western ethical and political philosophy. And he hates this idea of Hobbes. He says, no, 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 our state of nature is not killing and hurting each other. Like deep down, we are good. Our nature is good. And he says these things which, Thomas Jefferson will also build on in the Declaration of Independence later. Every human is equal and has a natural right to life, liberty, and property. Okay. Rousseau is a little bit later, but he is buddy-buddy with Locke, and you can say he's kind of in the same school of thought. And he is also anti-Hobbes. But his approach isn't that we are actually good, you're wrong, we're not bad. He's saying the state of nature of humans is neither good nor bad. All these evil things that you say is in our nature, Hobbes, doesn't come from our nature at all. It comes from society. That's how he thinks about it. Then comes Hume, who is my all-time third favorite top philosopher. And he drops this bomb. Rationality has no place in morality. You can't use reason. They're like, what? What are you talking about, dude? And he says, here's how I come to this. If we use logic, the math of reason, there is no valid way of going from Ellis killed Bob to Ellis shouldn't have killed Bob unless we have accepted an axiom like killing is bad. So he's saying there is no logical calculations to make this jump unless you start from a dogmatic rule like killing is bad. Axioms are where you start from in logic, not what you arrive at. So because of this, he defines all these like fallacies that you can actually sort of like poke holes in other philosophers' work. And he says it has to be dogmatic. There's no other way. Then comes Immanuel Kant, who, unlike Hume, I don't like his ideas at all, to be honest. Let's just say I think his name is very descriptive and leave it at that. So he says, Hume, what are you talking about? We can't arrive at universal ethical rules using reason. Just watch me do it. Here is my algorithm. It's called categorical imperative, and to make it a bit easier to understand, I have somewhat badly paraphrased it here, but it's mostly in the same spirit. Universal ethical rules are those that would work if we applied it to everyone. And of course, without an example, this is still hard to understand what he's talking about. Here's an example that he himself gives. Let's try to figure out, is it right or wrong to lie to a bank to get a loan? Well, Hume, you say there needs to be a rule about this is wrong. I'm saying I'm going to use my reason algorithm to figure out if it's wrong, right or wrong. Let's think about it. If everybody lied, if we applied this to everybody, the banking system would collapse. Therefore, it wouldn't work if applied to everyone. So clearly, we have arrived at the very clear conclusion, he says, that the universal rule is not to lie. Boom, I used reason to figure this out. You're wrong. Well, I'm going to jump to Mill without talking a lot of, shit behind Kant's back. There is Mill, who is not the founder, but probably the most important figurehead of utilitarianism. And utilitarianism starts from this idea that the hedonists had. Like, remember, maximizing pleasure tells you what's the right thing to do. But the argument of utilitarianism is like, okay, you may do something that gives you a lot of pleasure, so you may decide it's like the right thing for you, but that action might cause a lot of pain to someone else or multiple other people. So what we have to do to evaluate each action is not just to look at your individual pleasure, but let's add up all these positive and negative pleasure and pain effects over every single individual in the society, and we need to maximize the total pleasure, the summed up pleasure or well-being across the whole society to find out if an action is right or wrong. So the right behaviors are those that maximize the total well-being of society at large. Okay, we are now jumping to early 20th century and arriving at my second all-time top favorite philosopher, Wittgenstein. And he invents the constructivism, which I love, which is built upon this idea that every statement we make actually carries with it a million unspoken assumptions that are not directly reflected in the words, but as a society living in specific cultures, we think we share all these assumptions, so we don't even realize that we are making them without saying them out loud. And in fact, a lot of these assumptions we really do share, so we understand each other, but some of them we think we share when in fact we might not. So you can use his method that he devised to deconstruct any moral statement, and you'll find a whole list of assumptions that need to be true for the sentence or statement to make sense. And once you analyze those, you can start finding a lot of holes again in other philosophers' work. I love this dude. Now, I should also talk about moral relativity. So we're talking about universal rules, like ethical rules that need to be right or wrong for everyone. And moral relativity says, how can anyone talk about this? People have different opinions on what's right or wrong. Different cultures have massively different opinions of what is the right behavior versus the wrong. Not everything is clear-cut calculable by reason at all. So everything is subjective to the culture and maybe even to the individual. So nobody has the right to impose their culture's ethical rules on other cultures. Who are you to say what you think is right, culture? That's the moral relativity, which, to be honest, I think is great at its core, but has been twisted, especially in the 20th and early 21st century, to justify doing whatever you want. Its core is not that twisted version. Anyway, and finally, we arrive at my favorite philosopher duo of all time, Bill and Ted, who have summed this all up by saying, be excellent to each other and party on, dudes. Thank you very much. That's my TED Talk. Thanks for listening.